How about my guy Trey McBride? How great is Trey McBride? I am very, very high on him. I have got him ranked over Laporta.
I over Laporta.
Yes.
Wow.
PPR.
Okay, that is a take. I mean, look, I think McBride is going to be great. I did a little work on his target share from last year to see if anything like that is sustainable, and the answer is no. I mean, his targets will drop down to where they were the final couple of games of the season. It came down to earth a little bit. That's what you can kind of expect. It's just if he kept up his target share from last year, it would be the number one target share we've seen from a tight end ever. It's just not something that's going to happen. So you have to scale that down a little bit. Also, you have Marvin Harrison Jr. there. It's going to be a factor, whereas they had no receivers when McBride was crushing it last year. That said, I have him fifth. He's still a top 5 tight end. I would go. I would prefer to go Ingram, who's going 2 to 3 rounds later. I mean, Ingram's been a top 5 tight end the last 2 years. He had 3 players in the NFL had more catches than Ingram last year. Not tight ends, players in the NFL. I mean, he's so cheap. He's going in the 7th, 8th rounds.
What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome. And we are here with our guy, Mike Clay from ESPN. Mike and I work together on SiriusXM. I don't know, maybe 30, 40 shows. Philly area guy. We get along really well, so we'll bring him in now. What's up, Mike? How are you?
I'm good, and we had a nice little run there on SiriusXM, and I know you're hanging it up soon to an extent. So congrats on a great run. You're a legend, certainly on the Mount Rushmore for the channel. Who else is on that Mount Rushmore? Who are we putting on there? Fantasy Sports Radio. You're number one. Who else do we got?
I'm not. Oh, wow, that's a good question. I mean, wow, the RotoWire guys have been on there from day one. There's been it's a almost completely different crew from when the channel launched in 2010 to what's on here now. So I don't know. More importantly, who's on the Mount Rushmore of fantasy analysts of all time? That's really the question, Mike.
And well, that's also you.
You're going to get some consideration, as for sure.
maybe someday. Maybe someday.
You're there. Now you're there. But the thing that I loved about our doing the show is we would have very respectful conversations about players, and we disagreed a little bit, but people loved it. People really sucked it up here. So I thought it would be great to kind of hang with you a little bit here. I'm kind of focusing a little bit more on this podcast, and then we'll do what we normally do, right? The projection comparison situation.
Mm-hmm.
So
love that.
Yeah, let's get into it. And you and I, haven't really chopped it up much. So let's start with quarterbacks. And I'm just going to cherry pick some dudes here that I'm into. And I don't know where you stand on Mr. Jordan Love, Mike, but we're going to start there because that's kind of, I think, my guy this year. I'm always looking for a little bit of an advantage, like a value with a dude who could still be a stud, basically. Your thoughts on what you saw from Jordan Love? How much is it for reals? And let's hear a yardage and touchdown passing projection from you.
Yeah, so I like him. Now, he did appear in 17 games last year. As you know, I'm a little conservative with games played. Part of that is doing a lot of work with player props. So I want to be careful with going too high, because if you just project everyone for 17 games and compare to player props, you're going to be over on 85, 90% of them. It's just the nature of the beast. There's so much injury risk factored into those. So 15-game projection for Jordan Love. I do like him as a player. I think it was a good find by Green Bay. I think they're going to have another terrific season. But I remember this argument you and I had years ago. One of our hottest debates was Patrick Mahomes year 2 after the 50 touchdown game. And my argument was he's going to be great. He's going to play at an MVP level, but his stats are going to come down. It's just, you got to bet against the extremes. Okay. He did. He had a great season. His stats came down a little bit. Same kind of thing here with Love. I'm not going to project him for 32 passing touchdowns again. But I have him at 26, and I have him for just a hair under 3,700 passing yards. It's still going to be a good season. It's still going to be back in QB1 numbers. Doesn't run a lot, but just enough to hang in that conversation. So I expect a little bit of a step back, but again, some of that is factoring in some injury rate.
It's difficult because CJ Stroud is another great example, because we're either going to go two ways here. Either the breakout year the year before was a little bit of, I don't want to say a fluke, but a little bit of an aberration, or the guy's a stud and he's going to get better in year two. I
Mhm.
mean, that's kind of what I'm looking at with Stroud and Love. Do you agree?
Yeah, I'm with you, and I think the ceiling's higher for Stroud. The pedigree's obviously there. He's going into year number two. And Love, I mean, efficiency wise, you look at like completion rate, YPA. I know you look at those kind of
Yeah.
things when you're projecting these guys. They
Yeah.
were pedestrian last year. They were average. They were basically league average. So he had a very high touchdown rate. And for me, when I'm doing this kind of thing, it's just so hard for me to project those extreme touchdown rates because we know how volatile it is. Guys go from
Yeah.
first in the league in touchdown rate to the complete other end unless the situation is perfect for them. And that's the case even for guys. I think usually it's wide receivers that we apply it to. Guys will get a ton of end zone targets and still their touchdown number will fly all over the map. So
Yeah.
that's part of why. I mean, Packers fans are a little irritated with me this offseason. That's kind of why I came in on the defensive, John, because I already hear it from them. Like, why do you hate Jordan Love? Why is your projection so low? It's really not that low. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a 26 passing touchdowns in 15 games is a good number. That's going to be a highly productive season. So cautious optimism there, but I think it's more like fringe QB1 than an elite fantasy quarterback.
Gotcha. And I did go ahead and, I could be wrong, but, I project the games out. And when I see a young guy who hasn't had any injury problems, I'll go 17 games.
Mhm.
If he has any problems, I'll pull back going forward. So I did go the 17 games there. It might be a little bit much. Speaking of touchdown rates, and I know you're a big regression guy and all that, and believe me, I'm all over it too. But there was a guy who I said, man, if he can come even close to his excellent touchdown rate as not a full-time player in 2022, then he's going to light it up. That is Brock Purdy. And he
Mhm.
did it. It didn't, I think he went down a little bit, but he still led the NFL. So where are you at with Purdy? Because now we've got 2 years basically of him rolling with like what, a 7-8% touchdown rate, which is absurd.
Yeah, not to mention YPA, right? Fourth in 2022, first last year too. So he led. I mean, look, if you just base your evaluation of quarterbacks on stats, just rate stats, efficiency stats, Brock Purdy's the best quarterback in the NFL coming
Yeah.
off last year. I mean, he just dominated pretty much every category. The reason that most people don't rank him that highly, if you're just rating quarterbacks, not fantasy, just rating quarterback ability, is the Kyle Shanahan factor. And that, to your point, is I think why he's finished number one in that category the last 2 years and is so high in YPA. I mean, look who leads the NFL in YPA over the last decade. It's Jimmy Garoppolo, it's Brock Purdy, it's I think CJ Beathard's the other one that's up
It's
there
all the
from or Nick
McVay
Mullins.
Shanahan tree,
Nick
basically.
Mullins. Yeah, Nick Mullins is the other one, right? So it's just the nature of the beast with this offense. And so I can certainly buy into him throwing a lot of touchdowns and keeping up some extent that high touchdown rate. So I'm a little lower with him because Christian McCaffrey's obviously a factor there. 15 games as well. I'm at 24 passing touchdowns, but still leading the NFL in YPA. Still a really terrific season. I put him right in that tier with Jordan Love. I think they're very
Yeah.
close in terms of fantasy value.
You and I have done, a couple of interviews at the combine. I mean, I
Hmm.
remember we interviewed Josh Allen together. And by
Yeah,
the way, I came away from that interview saying, I don't think I've ever seen a guy more inclined to ball out in the NFL than Josh Allen. My
right.
favorite receiver interview of all time, and I set it up because I loved him at the Senior Bowl, was Ricky Pearsall.
Oh,
Now,
nice.
yeah, I love Ricky Pearsall. I'm going just Ricky. By the way, I'm predicting that he's that good that we don't need to. We can just go Ricky. So in 2-3 years, like, oh, what do you think of Ricky? Like, oh, I love Ricky. You know what I mean? Like, we can go just first name. And it's been a while since we had a Ricky. Ricky
Wow.
Williams, Ricky Henderson. We need a new Ricky. But like, are they going to throw more? Like, are they changing the offense? I thought on draft day when they drafted, I'm like, oh, Ayuk or Debo's got to go.
Hmm.
Maybe Ayuk still goes, but let's say they stick with these guys. Like they've got to change the offense a little bit, don't you think?
Yeah, and I don't think they're going to. I think it's going to be one of them years where Pearsall, who by the way is a back end first round pick, and those guys don't produce like top 10, top 12 drafted wide receivers. So probably going to be a slow start for him. It's a guy that's going to be probably drop. He'll be drafted a little bit, dropped after week one or two, and then if Debo gets hurt or Ayuk gets hurt or traded at the deadline, suddenly he's going to be the hot waiver ad. So that's what I expect is going to be the case for Pearsall this year. Going to be a slow start. Don't forget, Juwan Jennings, pretty good
I
Pretty good
know.
player.
I know.
He's going to be the 3. They still have Kittle. They still have CMC. They have the 2 receivers. And you're right. Maybe we get a Schefter bombshell here, and Ayuk gets traded. It's possible. It's a late in the offseason for that, so I would be surprised at this point. But it's possible. And if that happens, yeah, Pearsall will skyrocket in value. I'm with you.
You mentioned Schefter. Programming note: I am the, I guess, main guest on Adam's podcast this week. By the
Oh,
way,
sweet, nice.
yeah. So I was you in the chair with Shefty, and now we've switched it up here a little bit. You mentioned Mahomes. I'm actually very into Mahomes this year. I've got him as my QB2. Clearly, that YPA has been a problem, and they're clearly looking to address it. What do you think of Mahomes this year?
Yeah, so I'm with you. I think that we're going to see that that offense kind of change a little bit. Something that I think wasn't discussed a lot last year was his average depth of throw, which was near the basement in the league. I'm looking here. He finished 40th, so that was 11th percentile. So one of the lowest ADOTs in the NFL, by far the lowest of his career, almost by a full yard. So that's been the trend the last couple of years. He was more aggressive earlier in his career. But they went out and addressed that. I think that they're kind of done with that. I think they adjusted to so many defense playing cover 2 against them, 2 high safeties.
Oh, yeah.
I think that they decided we're going to adjust to this, be more conservative, win with defense, run the ball when we can, dump it off, those kind of things. But also, it's been a wide receiver issue as well since Tyreek left. So I think with Marquise Brown in there and Xavier Worthy in there, that we're going to see that number go up, more throws downfield, and a bounce back for Patrick Mahomes. So, I'm fine targeting him. It's not like he's super expensive right now in drafts. I mean, we're doing staff mocks right now, and Anthony Richardson's going ahead of him.
Wow.
Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, so he's not super expensive right now. Not to mention, by the way, he didn't have a rushing touchdown last year. It's the first time in his career that he hasn't had a rushing touchdown in a full season. So that's probably going to bounce back a little bit as well. So yeah, I think he has a little bit of a better season.
Chopping it up here with a guy, Mike Clay from ESPN, my former co-host on the satellite radio machine there. Your boy Tua, doing well. There are some limitations. Where are you at with Tua? Last year I did have concerns about his availability, and he showed a lot, dropping some weight this year. I've got him at 30 in 15 games. That's a big number, Mike. Your thoughts on Tua?
You have him at 30 passing touchdowns?
Yes, I do.
Wow. Yeah, bolder than me. 15 games, 23 for me. So you figure extrapolate that out, that's probably 26. So I'm a little behind you.
Well, you are typically low. You come in low on everyone.
I mean, Mahomes, I'm 6 above where he was last year. So it just kind of depends on the circumstances. And, look, Tua last year had the hot start, and that carried his season because he was a horrific fantasy quarterback after the first 2 months of the season. I mean, look at this. He had I'm doing some quick math here. 18 touchdowns in his first 8 games through the air. He had 9 in his final, or 11 in his final 9 games. So he had only 3 games with more than 1 touchdown and none with more than 2 after having a whole bunch of high touchdown games early in the season. The second half fall off is a thing with this Dolphins offense. It's been an issue with Tua for years. He is not a good fantasy quarterback. He led the league in passing yardage last season and was not a good fantasy quarterback. Unless you spot started him just for a couple of those games. So, and doesn't run the ball. So I'm not, I think the yardage comes down and the passing touchdowns come down.
Wow. Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny because it's one of these things where you're right on player. You take a stand, you're right and wrong. You either way. Like if you love Tua, you were kind of right. But if you didn't like me, you were kind of wrong. I do like Odell being added to the mix. I actually do think Jonnu will help a little bit. But yeah. I mean, okay. I'm surprised because I know you were kind of into Tua. Any other quarterback jump out to you? I mean, we've got Jaden Daniels versus Caleb Williams, and I've got them like neck and neck, and in my top 12 because of course, the cheat code.
Yeah, so I do have Jaden just ahead for that same reason, but I think Caleb's going to have one of the best rookie seasons we've seen from a quarterback because of the supporting cast. Number one, quarterbacks just don't walk into a situation with one of the best, maybe the best trio at wide receiver in the NFL, plus basically two starting tight ends, 3, I think, quality running backs. I mean, it's such a good situation. So I like Caleb, but I think the running for Daniels is going to be huge. The guy I'll ask you about is Joe Burrow because he is the guy in our staff mocks that's plummeting. He's basically going, 8th, 9th round in 10-team leagues. And same thing in 12-teamers. I mean, you're seeing him across the industry falling. with the hype around some of these other guys like Stroud and Richardson. So look, Burrow a couple years ago healthy, QB4 in fantasy. Last year after that bad first month, once he got going before the injury, QB4, and yet you can get him a QB 8-9 sometimes. So he's the guy I've been targeting as of late. I think he bounces back over 4,000 yards, pushes for 30 touchdowns.
Well, I've got him at 8. I've always been a huge Burrow guy. I don't know if we were together on that, but when he won that natty, I did tweet that I thought he was the next Tom Brady. I mean, I really did get a lot of Brady vibes from him, a more athletic Brady, maybe with a lesser arm. But the injuries have scared me a little bit. This T. Higgins drama is a little scary. They did lose the offensive coordinator. They did lose Joe Mixon. It's not an easy call. I would love to. I'd feel a lot better about Burrow, Mike, if we can get through the summer without any injury drama.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're looking good in mid to late August, I'll probably feel a little bit better. But the one thing that kind of bothers me is he doesn't play under center. And I don't know what is up with that, but I was talking with someone close to the team who said, yeah, he just like won't do it. And I'm like, that's a little limiting, I think. Like, look at Brock Purdy. Look at all the opportunities for play action when you're playing under center. So that's a little thing that bothers me a little bit. I do like Jermaine Burton. So I guess I'm kind of like agnostic on Burrow this year, but duly noted because I've always loved Burrow. I mean, I'll say this, Mike, we have not yet seen Joe Burrow's career year.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with that. I'm with you. I think I hear the concerns. They also are very pass heavy. I don't think that's going to change. They're one of the pass heaviest teams in the NFL.
Yeah.
But also, like, if you think about that tier where he's going, he's the cheapest. I mean, that's kind of the attraction. Like, I didn't go into draft season especially thinking, well, Joe Burrow is going to be my guy this year, but he's just so cheap. It's like, this guy is top 5 upside, and I can get him down, after Dak sometimes, as the 8th quarterback off the board. But that tier right in there with Richardson, Stroud, Dak, I think those guys are kind of similar in value, and yet Burrow's the guy going often the latest. If not Dak, it's Burrow.
He fits my profile that have kind of formed maybe the last 2, 3, 4 years. When you see these running quarterbacks, I've been a little against them because of the availability issues. I mean, to be fair, Jalen Hurts has had problems. Kyler's had problems. Lamar's had problems over the last 3 to 4 years. Maybe intermittent, but some of these are coming at a bad time, like Jalen Hurts in 2021, 2022 wasn't really useful in the playoffs. So my prototype is I want a guy, big, strong pocket passer who wins from the pocket consistently, which is probably more predictable. But if you do need to run, keep the running in your back pocket and give me 55 at rushing attempts for 200 plus 2, 3, 4 rushing touchdowns to augment. It's not guaranteed. Mahomes is one of these guys. He didn't get any last year, but Joe Burrow and Jordan Love are kind of like the perfect quarterback to me.
Yeah, and don't forget, you mentioned you won 50, 55 carries. A healthy Joe Burrow in 16 games 2 years ago at 75 carries, over 250 yards, 5 rushing touchdowns. So when he's been healthy, he has run the ball. That was the big difference with him in 2022 when he had that big season. So I agree. I think his best fantasy season is ahead of him. He's still, 27. And is in a good situation. So I'm going to be targeting him this year. Remember, injured last year, the year before, 35 passing touchdowns. The year before, 34. This guy can put up some big time numbers. So I'm expecting to bounce back.
I mean, to your point about regression and all that, and when he was in the doldrums last year after like week 5, I mean, it was bad. I'm like, please trade for this guy. I mean, you want to talk about an ROI, and then he went on like a 6-game run where he was great. And then
he was QB4. Yeah, you're right. He was that, and that's what I'm talking about. It's I just think the concerns with him are now overhyped. It's gone too far. This is a guy with top 5 upside you can get in the 8th round. It's just a good discount if you want to wait a quarterback.
I mean, he's a damn good football player, and he's damn near elite. So that's a good ROI. Let's transition on over with Mike Clay from ESPN to the running back position. I'm sure you have CMC at 1 here, but I am very enamored with a foursome at the top that I'm calling the flawless 4. I've probably cursing them by calling them that. But, I like my running backs to be young, durable, and versatile. Like, I know that's a lot to ask, but I would say generally durable at least. Brees Hall, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, and Jahmyr Gibbs. To me, and I know you'll probably put Barkley in that group, and I do have him next, but I kind of love how they stand out, Mike. To me, I'm probably taking one of those four like 80% of the time in round one this year. So I'm actually in a running back this year in round one. Not last year at all, but this year I am.
Yeah, so I actually think it's a tier. Well, really, it's a tier of one with McCaffrey. I think I'm a little nervous about him being 28. I mean, you look at the last decade, only, or actually, I guess it's the last 5 years, only 7% of top 15 finishers at running back have been 28 or older.
Ooh.
So you wonder when's the shelf for some of these guys. There's a lot of 28 plus running backs: Kamara, Henry, Mixon, McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, James Conner. There's a lot of them this year. So a little nervous about that. But it's so hard. I mean, his week to week production is just so good. It's so hard to pass on him. But I think it's McCaffrey. The next year, I think it's too deep. I think it's Hall and Bijan Robinson, and then I still have Taylor fourth, but I think he is a tier below with Barkley, and still hanging with Kyren Williams in that tier. I'm still buying in, but look, I agree with your top three. I'm targeting those guys early. If I'm picking in the top three, I'm taking a running back. I know some people are taking CeeDee Lamb. I want one of them big three, no doubt about it. But yeah, oftentimes I've gotten Taylor or Barkley later in the first round. I'm happy to do that as well. I think they're going to be terrific. And I'll just add this on Taylor. I think the reason he's a tier down is, he doesn't do a lot in the passing game, and Anthony Richardson probably going to steal some rushing touchdowns from him as well. That's a factor for Barkley too. Just limits the ceiling a little bit, but I still think he gets the double-digit touchdowns. Big Taylor fan. I'm with you. He should be in the top 5.
Little bit of a drop off after that, though. Like, I don't even know what the next tier is. You mentioned Kyren Williams, ETN, Rashad White. I'm kind of still in on Derrick Henry. HN's a tough projection. I mean, it does drop off a cliff after this tier, Mike.
Yeah, it really does. I like Gibbs and Pacheco after Kyren. I think those are two quality targets there. Pacheco is going to they don't have a number 2. I mean, they just ran out of options and signed CEH back to be there too. It's going to be the Pacheco show. So I like him quite a bit. And I'm with you. I think once you get in, White and Cook, you could throw Josh Jacobs, Ken Walker in there. You see a drop off. I'm lower on HN. Again, you're just buying on that big play ability, that high touchdown rate, that insane yards per carry. It's just not sustainable. They drafted another running back. You still have Mostert there. There's just a lot of factors. Not to mention that the knock on him coming in was that he was too small. He was not a guy that can handle, 17, 18, 19 touches. We barely saw that last year. So you're really counting on, Hall of Fame level efficiency, and I can't do that. So he's just going too early for me in the second round.
A couple of guys I like down the board a little bit here. I mean, I'm going to get Ramondre right 3 years in a row because I loved him in 2022. I didn't like him last year. I actually was worried about Zeke Elliott, but I actually think his competition got worse this year with no Zeke. Still like Dave Montgomery. I know he's boring, but I kind of liked him. And I got to tell you, I mean, the Steelers are going to run the rock this year. So, I mean, it's a little confusing with two guys, but I'll just say that I like them both, Najee and Jalen Warren. I think they can both be RB2s.
Yeah, it's funny. I have them projected for almost the same exact number of fantasy points, 176. It's almost the exact number, and it's two different ways. Najee is the runner, Warren is the pass catcher. It just worked out that way. So I'm fine with them. I think they'll both be more flexes, fringe RB2s. Some weeks it'll be Harris, some weeks it'll be Warren, depending on game script. So they're right around 25 for me. A guy I found myself taking a lot that's going quite a bit after where I have him ranked is Brian Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
I know Eckler's there, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Eckler's the 1A, but I don't think so. I mean, he's 29 coming off a season where he was scaled back and struggled. He'll be out there when they're throwing the football, which might limit Robinson, but Robinson, if I'm not mistaken, led all running backs in yards per target last year. He can do some damage in that game. He's big. He's going to be the goal line guy. Perhaps some lanes opening up with Jaden Daniels back there. So I'm excited for him. I think he's the 1A, and he's going not far off Eckler. I don't understand that. So I'll take him all day long.
I mean, I do my draft plan article that I've done forever, and I draft a bunch of teams implementing the plan using ADP. And I mean, I did it 100 times in the summer, and it was like every time it was like round 9. I'm like, well, let me get Brian Robinson again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, he was unbelievable. Pretty good receiver. I watched him at the Senior Bowl catching the ball. Actually, Ron Rivera came on the radio show this past summer and said that they were going to throw it to him on early downs. That didn't necessarily play out, but pretty good receiver. I'm with you on that one. I always find that you get a nice little discount with the rookies, so I'm sure you're probably looking at Jonathon Brooks, right? As maybe not September, but I mean, by the second half of the season, I believe Jonathon Brooks is going to be rolling. You like Brooks?
Yeah, we've had a rookie RB, a rookie running back finish top 15 of fantasy points 9 of the last 10 years. It's just, I know it's not a great rookie class, but someone's probably going to step up and have a big season. He's the most likely, of course, in Carolina. Could be a slow start, but here's the thing. To your point earlier, that drop off at running back, right? Once you get past like Walker, Achane, Stevenson, then it's a lot of question marks. Swift,
Yeah.
Aaron Jones, James Conner, Brian Robinson, guys. I mean, Robinson, I like him where he's going. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, but he's probably not going to be like a fringe RB1 or anything like that. Brooks is a guy that has a 3-down ability, can run the ball, can catch the ball, be a 20 touch guy. So it might be a slow start, but after that tier, I just mentioned with Achane, Stevenson, guys like that, I'm fine to take that shot on Brooks and wait a couple of weeks before I feel super confident in him. But the sky's the limit for sure.
Yeah. How about in Tennessee, Tony Pollard at 80
Oh.
overall, or my guy Tyjae Spears at 110? I freaking loved Spears last year, and he didn't crush it or anything, but if you have the gift of sight, he's good.
Yeah, it's such a tough one because look, on one hand, you're like, okay, Spears was basically, what was he, RB25 last year? He was a flex in a backfield with Hall of Famer Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
So if Henry's out and Pollard's in, theoretically, Spears should move up and be better this year, right? Maybe jump into the teens.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Pollard was quickly signed to a contract that included a lot of money, and he's the bigger back, and he's gonna play. I mean, probably best case scenario is this is a 1-for-1 out of the gate, and then maybe Spears over time takes some control there. But barring a Pollard injury, I think they're going to split this backfield very much like kind of like Pittsburgh, except for a little bit more evened out in terms of the role they played. So it's going to be a tough one. But if you draft one of these guys as your flex or RB2, you're just going to have to ride it every week and just hope for the best. But I do have Spears ahead of Pollard, but that's a tough one. It is a close call because they're both going to play a lot.
One more running back, Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, the guy's scoring 7 to 10 tutties, right? And he's catching 40 plus. He has to.
Yeah, I mean, he's just going to be one of them boring flex guys, I think, you could throw in there. I don't think he's going to be super exciting. I mean, Rico Dowdle actually played a lot more than I think we realized last year as the 2 with Dallas. He's playing like a third of the snaps, which it was so quiet, but we were so focused, tunnel vision on criticizing Tony Pollard that we forgot about Dowdle in the background. So, and they might not be done. I mean, would it be shocking if Miles Sanders is playing for them week 1? No. I don't think so. So I'm not. Yeah. He's going in the double-digit rounds. He's not going to cost you a lot right now. I'm fine with that. There's just not much of a ceiling there.
Yeah, it's a good point about Miles Sanders. We're not done here. Let's move on to wide receiver. I'm sure you're all over CeeDee Lamb at the top here. I mean, I love Garrett Wilson. I guess the first question is, are you in with the markets, if you will, on Marvin Harrison Jr.? That's it's pretty unique for a rookie wideout getting this much love. I mean, going in the top 15, but I got to sign off on it basically based on role and talent and situation. It's all pretty solid here for Harrison.
Yeah, I think once you get past 8 and you get into Adams, Olave, Pittman, Evans, Harrison, London, those kind of guys, that's where he belongs. I think that's totally fair. That's an extremely optimistic ranking, yes, but history says these receivers taken in the top 10 are going to get about a quarter of the targets, and they're going to have highly productive seasons. Like 850 yards is the floor for any of these guys that plays a significant role, crossing off like Mike Williams and John Ross. But everyone else in the sample puts up big stats as a rookie. So I have a wide receiver 13. Again, I could see going as high as 9 or 10, somewhere in that range. I have not drafted him yet in our staff leagues because, when there's an exciting new toy, everyone wants them, and like Richardson and the same kind of thing, like we talked about earlier. But I think that it's tough to strike where he's going because he hasn't played yet. But at the same time, I do have him ranked 13th, so he's in that vicinity.
Yeah, you don't buy the hype. Oftentimes, you're probably right. Over the long haul, you'll probably miss out on a couple big old breakouts, but playing a long game, I'm sure you're probably right. Let's see here. Let's cherry pick a couple of wideouts I think are going to pop this year, and I'll start with Georgie Pickens. We know they're going to not throw the ball a lot. They're going to run the rock a lot, but we also know that he'll kick ass in the target share. Russell get him the ball just like he got the ball to Cortland Sutton. I think the O-line is going to be great. I feel really good about the Steelers, and I think George is going to lead the way at receiver. What do you think?
Yeah, it's tough because Arthur Smith has had some decent seasons in the past with Tennessee and his first year in Atlanta with passing production when he's had a decent quarterback. So if Russ plays like he did last year, which is better than people realize, I think he's probably average at worst in terms of his on field ability. Maybe Pickens has a really good season, but at the same time, they're gonna run the ball like you said earlier.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a low volume game. They have a good defense, so they're gonna try and keep these scores low and run a conservative offense. They've switched to that since in the post Ben era. They've switched to a run heavy offense, and I don't think that's gonna change. So I'm definitely worried about Pickens being basically Drake London. And we would look, Drake London in theory, based on draft pedigree, should be the better player. He was drafted in the first round, and he was still so inconsistent. What do you have, three games with 18 points last year? It was just so dreadful the last 2 years with London in that offense. So that's my big concern with George Pickens. I just think it's going to be so back and forth, up and down, boom bust, and he's going to end up finishing like, if he makes it through 17 games, like wide receiver 25. That's my concern with him.
I mean, I'm counting on big plays, period.
Yeah.
And I think he can
You'll
do
get
it.
those.
He can do it better than London.
Yeah, I mean, he's more acrobatic. You also have we'll say, locker room / off field concerns with him too. What's going to happen if he's not getting targets? Is he going to? He's the number one now, and if he doesn't get the targets, is he gonna be happy? So that's going to be curious to see how that plays out too.
That is a guy I did chop it up with at the combine, and I always use the word bombastic, and not negative, but my man's bombastic. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like he's high energy, so I mean he is probably a little high maintenance. Mike Tomlin probably well equipped for that. How about the Houston guys? Because that's like it's a real quandary here. Do we really have 3 top 40 wide receivers there in Houston? I mean, I feel like they're all a little overvalued. Nico, and I love Tank Dell last year. Steph Diggs. We do have a new data tool coming over at FantasyPoints, data tracking separation, and spoiler alert, the data on Diggs in that regard does not look good, so he might be falling off a little bit.
Yeah, he was still he was still good last year. I know his efficiency was down with that Bills offense having its issues firing the coordinator, but he's still good overall, and he's still heading into his age 30 season. So I don't think he's going away. I don't think Houston trades for him to be like just a dude that's chilling on the sideline coming in 3 wide sets, which they're gonna have three on the field a lot anyway. So I have him 19. I have Nico ahead. I think he's the preferred choice. I agree with the consensus there at 15. And then Dellum a little bit lower on, coming off the injury with those 2 guys there. Dalton Schultz as well. They bring in Mixon at running back, all those kind of things. So I have him at 28. I haven't drafted him a ton, but I think they're all about right. It's just one of them things. Get yourself a little exposure to the offense where you can. And I feel the same way about Green Bay. Find a spot, get a little exposure to that offense. It's going to be it's hard to figure out, but if you take a shot on the right guy and it works out, it's going to be huge because the offense is going to be good from a passing standpoint. So that's what I'm trying to do. I don't really have a preference at ADP, but it's like if I'm drafted in the right spot and these guys fall to me, I'll take some shots on both of those offenses.
Yeah, well, speaking of Green Bay, we'll go there. About 2 or 3 podcasts ago, we had Gary Melton on, who is the father of Bo and Max. Nice. Well, I happen to grow up with Gary in South Jersey, and we played a lot of sports together growing up. So it's a great podcast if you haven't checked that out. I had forgotten, this is so long ago, Mike, when you were like -9. Gary Melton and I both got called up to Little League from the lower group. They needed a couple of kids. I completely forgot all about that, but I did impress him with my memory though, because I told him what team he played on, what position he played, and his order in the batting lineup, which I did recall from 1978. I'm like, yeah, you were on Rotary, you played shortstop, and you hit third. He's like, how the hell do you remember that? I'm like, I never forget sports stuff. But Christian Watson is great kid, by the way. but your thoughts there, because obviously the hamstring was a problem. But man, I mean, I think he's a league winner because I think he commands the ball. I think everyone there is good. Dontavian Wicks is good. Romeo Dobbs, but Watson's a little different. So you in on him?
Yeah, so this one hurts because Watson was my guy last year. I had him everywhere. This
All
guy I
right.
talked up all offseason, and when he played, he was heavily used near the goal line. He had made the plays. He looked like a league winner, to your point. Unfortunately, he had the injuries. Now, that's supposedly a thing of the past. It makes me feel better about him. Not as high as I was last year, but you don't have to pay that price tag this
No,
year.
no.
I am going against consensus with him. I have him as the number one Packers wide receiver. Now, he's at 40. But I do have him ahead of his ADP, so he's my target in this
Okay.
Packers receiver room. I actually don't want anyone else. I don't understand the Wicks hype necessarily. Dobbs, he's whatever. He's going to make some plays, but probably not going to be fantasy relevant.
Right.
And Jaden Reed, I'm just out on. The guy scored 10 touchdowns last year and was like 40th in touches
Yeah.
and targets at wide receiver, and really benefited when Watson was out of the lineup. So I think he's just being overdrafted, straightforward.
You're probably
Could be
right.
wrong, but I think Watson's the preferred choice here.
I like them both. I'm probably part of that problem with Jaden Reed. I actually freaking loved Jaden Reed last year. I really did. We nailed that. Our guy Brett Whitefield, who I know you know, we watched him at the Senior Bowl, and he hypothesized in the summer that Jaden Reed will be the volume guy. I'm like, oh, I see it. I mean, playing inside and all that, it's just a lot to ask for a rookie. Well, he did do it, and now to your point, he is getting a little too much love. Well, do you have anyone else here? I'm a Lad McConkey guy, but I actually like Josh Palmer a little bit more. People are on to Deontay. I think Khalil Shakir is a high quality player. And I'm also in on Jamison Williams. Those are a few of my favorites down the board a little bit. Anything for you?
Yeah, I think all viable flyers in the mid to late rounds there. I would say Cortland Sutton's a guy I've drafted like everywhere because he's just plummeting. No one wants him, so you can get
Yeah.
him in the double digit rounds right now. Especially, I mean, here's the thing: you're not going to pay a lot for him. He's already going to be used near the goal line, no matter who the quarterback is. The guy gets a ton of end zone targets. And what if Bo Nix is good? What if they hit a home run there? Sutton's clearly their number one receiver.
Yeah.
So
True.
he could have a career year this year. So where he's going in drafts, I love him. It's Jackson Smith and Jake and Tyler Lockett. I've plenty of exposure to both. They're both so cheap in drafts into double digit rounds. And then otherwise, yeah, like the guys you said, I'm going after these rookies. A lot of really good rookie class, first and second round. I'm throwing darts at whoever is atop the board: Odunze, Worthy, McConkey, Coleman, Thomas, you name it. If those guys are sitting there, I'm going to throw some darts.
Do you notice the ADP though on a lot of the rookies is getting a little out of control? And that's a lot for me to say because I'm usually all about the youngins. But like, Adunze again, he's good, but man, I mean, there is only one ball here.
Mhm.
You know, I see it across the board. Even Coleman in Buffalo is it's a little pricey. I don't know. I'm just noticing Brian Thomas. I mean, he could do nothing. So why is he the wide receiver 43? I mean, he could ball out, but I doubt it. Even Worthy, like wide receiver 37, but that's a big ask. I mean, this is not Ray. This is not Rashee Rice. A guy's going to sit in a soft spot of the zone and get a lot of volume. Uh, what do you think here? Am I crazy, or the markets, the people overrating the rookies a little bit lately?
Yeah, I'm probably a round or so lower on them than where they're going right now, but that's the usual. Everybody overhypes these guys, but usually that means one of them will fall, and that's who I'll throw a dart at. I'm not going to start that run. I'll finish that run with whoever falls to me. But the reason after my starting lineups filled out, I'm happy to take a shot on these guys
Sure.
because you mentioned Odunze. I mean, what happens if Keenan Allen tweaks
Yeah.
a hamstring?
Yeah.
I mean, boom,
Yeah.
we're talking must start in fantasy,
Right.
especially with him being a top 10 pick. So I'm with you. Might not be a more than a deep league flex out of the gate, maybe less than that. He's probably he might see 3 targets week one. But in time, if someone goes down, look out. I mean, the sky is really the limit. So that's why I'm going to throw darts at these guys once I have my starters.
You in on Cooper Cup at all, or are you just Team Puka all the way?
Yeah, definitely high on Puka. I haven't drafted Cup much in these drafts. I have him at 23. I mean, he just wasn't great last year.
No.
He
Yeah.
really wasn't. Even when he played, I mean, Puka kind of took control there. Which Rams offense is going to show up. It was really good, and then 2 years ago it was really bad, and we were really worried about that team. And does Stafford still have it? Does Kupp
I
still
know.
have it? They're so reliant
I
on those
know.
two guys. And then last year they were great again. So is it another year later with Stafford? Is this going to be a good team, a great offense, a good offense? Are they going to have some injuries and struggle? It's hard to say. So definitely going Puka is the clear one there.
I mean, I thought Sean McVay did the best coaching job of his life last year.
100%. I cannot agree more. Yeah.
Unbelievable. I actually called their demise the year before, by the
Mm-hmm.
way. I was like, no, it's going to go badly. And I was in on Stafford the year before. It's the every other year nature and the roller coaster ride. I'm trying to stay on that right track. And now I don't even know what. I mean, I guess you got to give him respect based on last year. I mean, Stafford, what the hell was
Yeah.
that? I thought he was done. And he was like balling. That was one of his best years.
Yeah, not to mention Raheem Morris in that defense. Obviously,
Oh,
he's
yeah.
gone, but I mean that defense had no business being even
No
competent.
business.
I know
All
that.
scheme. All scheme.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they had that one good game. Otherwise, they were probably like the 27th best defense. I mean, with what they had on paper last year, they should have been 32nd. They should have
Right.
been 33rd,
Right.
frankly. I mean, it was like all undrafted day 3 picks. There's no reason that defense should have even been
Totally.
NFL caliber, and yet they managed to hang in games and make the playoffs. So I'm with you. Best coaching job, better than the Super Bowl. I mean, they just to get that team to the playoffs was unbelievable.
Well, let's go to the final position here with the great Mike Clay from ESPN. I mean, I don't know about you, Mike, but I did retire from analyzing kickers and defenses. Fully retired from that, and I'm enjoying my retirement leisurely. But
I don't know.
always
I need your Jake Bates projection, like right now.
see. I don't
Yeah.
even know who that is. See that? Isn't
That's the
that
guy. That's
great?
the guy. Came from he was a UFL superstar. That's just the Lions just signed
Oh,
to a
okay.
2-year deal. So he's going to probably win that Lions kicking job.
All right. Well, we have experts at fantasypoints.com doing the
Yeah.
heavy lifting on that. And I did retire, but semi-serious, but also serious. How about my guy, Trey McBride? How great is Trey McBride? I am very, very high on him. I've got him ranked over Laporta.
I over Laporta.
Yes.
Wow. Okay,
PPR.
that is a take. I mean, look, I think McBride is going to be great. I did a little work on his target share from last year to see if anything like that is sustainable, and the answer is no. I mean, his targets will drop down to where they were the final couple of games of the season. It came down to earth a little bit. That's what you can kind of expect. It's just if he kept up his
A bit
target share
much.
from last year, it would be the number one target share we've seen from a tight end ever. It's just not something that's going to happen. So you have to scale that down a little bit. Also, you have Marvin Harrison Jr. there. It's going to be a factor, whereas they had like no receivers when McBride was crushing it last year. That said, I have him fifth. He's
Wow.
still a top 5 tight end. I would go. I would prefer to go Ingram, who's going 2 to 3 rounds later. I mean, Ingram's been a top 5 tight end the last 2 years. He had 3 players in the NFL more catches than Ingram last year. Not tight
Oh,
ends,
I know.
players in
I
the
know.
NFL. I mean, he's so cheap. He's going in the 7th, 8th round.
I know. I was actually in on him last year. I've after being a hater because he burned me a couple of times. Well, yeah, and I just cannot quit McBride because I at the Senior Bowl, man, that guy, and I reported back on the air for the last 2 years, starting in I guess 2021 or two. I don't even remember at this point. I guess it was two. I'm like, I watched him closely. The man won every single rep at the Senior Bowl. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doubting this guy at all. And he has balled out. So
Yeah, yes.
how about Pitts, man? I
Mhm.
incorrectly bought in, not thinking it was a good investment simply with his price down a little. I didn't account for the fact that the injury was still prevalent. That wasn't necessarily my fault, but the two things dogging him, bad coaching, if you will, and bad quarterback play remained last year. So
Mhm.
I regretted that, but now I have to go right back to the well here with Kirky.
Yeah, so my only issue with him is that tight end's very deep now. I have him tight end 10, and he's going or tight end 9, excuse me, and he's going much earlier than that. Several tight ends that I've ranked ahead are going after him. So that's the only issue. I don't love his ADP right now. In our 10 team mocks, he's going in the 7th round. It's just a little rich for me. I mean, again, I can get Ingram after that. I can get George Kittle after that, who led all tight ends in receiving yards last year. David Njoku, I think, is the best value. He's going several rounds later. So I just don't think it's necessary to take that shot on Kyle Pitts, but
Yeah.
I can't call him a bust or something, or a guy that I don't like. Of course, I'd want to have some Kyle Pitts. The guy has an enormous ceiling. I still love him as a buy-in dynasty. There's so much to like, and I believe he's the youngest of all of the top 10 tight ends. If Laporta might have a couple months on him, but everyone else is 24 or older. He's 23 entering the season, so still a lot to love there.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm looking right here. Laporta and Pitts are both 23. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got Brock Bowers at 21, but he's not. I don't know if he's like, in that realm. That
I don't have him in my top 10.
Oh,
I have him
right. Yeah, me either.
just outside. Yeah.
Yeah, me either. Well, you know what? Man, this is what's good. You don't get overly enamored with the high ceiling upside guys. I do. I bake it in a little bit more, and sometimes it works. But again, your long game over the long haul, you're probably right. More often than not, I do get a little enamored by upside. But one guy, I'd say my favorite target among the guys being drafted as starters is Jake Ferguson. I
Yes.
think it's a perfect combination of solid value and ability to outproduce his ADP basically, and some upside here around 90. Not a stud, but smart, plays fast. So you're out there, you're looking at him like, yeah, he can move a little bit here, reliable. Love me some Jake Ferguson. I think there'll be a passing team. I think he could be the number 2 option in the passing game for Dak.
100%. I think the top 9 tight ends get a lot. Maybe the top 8 if you don't count David Njoku. I feel like he's just getting no respect in drafts right now. But if we include him, there's that top 9. They get a lot of hype, and then Ferguson's like the next guy. And I agree, he might finish tight end 5 or 6. Think about what Dalton Schultz has done in this offense. Think about what Ferguson did last year when he was tight end 9. They're going to throw it a ton. They don't really have a tight end or a wide receiver 2 you feel great about. Like Brandon Cooks is going down the other end, was so inconsistent last year. So Ferguson is set up for another huge season. I'm with you. If you miss on tight ends and you're attacking other positions, don't feel bad to settle on someone like Jake Ferguson. After that, maybe you get to Dallas Goedert, then maybe you're a little worried. But even then, I mean, Hawkinson, when he gets off the injury, Dallas Goedert, we didn't mention Bowers, Dalton Schultz, maybe Pat Freiermuth. He's generating some hype. Cole Kmet in Chicago. There's just a lot of good options this year.
I'll leave you, Mike, with the sleeper of the year in any position. Tyler Conklin, all in, pretty athletic kid. All their analytics people loved him. That's why they signed him. Did a hell of a job last year in a bad situation. Clicking with Aaron Rodgers, no surprise. I think Aaron's going to love him. And if things go relatively well, I think Tyler Conklin, Mike, and I'm not a hot take guy here, I think he could be a top 10 guy.
Yeah, I wish I had this stat in front of me right now. Conklin has he's like one of 2 tight ends with 52 plus catches the last 3 years, something like that. I put it in my my Jets article that I wrote. Here it is. Yeah, one of 4 tight ends with 58 plus catches each of the past 3 seasons. So the floor there for him has been terrific. And think about the quarterback play that's just destroyed this offense for years. He continues to have a high floor, doesn't have really much competition at tight end. Yeah, so if Aaron Rodgers works out and he's even above average, I mean, think about the last time the Jets have had average quarterback play. It's been like 6, 7, 8 years. So if they get average play out of Rodgers, that's going to be huge for Conklin. So I'm with you. Yeah, I have him 17th, but he could be a sneaky top 12, top 10 guy too.
Yeah, well, you're definitely over the ADP there on Conklin, because he's like, I mean, he goes undrafted in some leagues, which is crazy.
He sure does. Yeah, most of them. Yeah.
Yep. Well, Mike, don't want to take up too much more of your Saturday afternoon, although I don't know if either one of us is going outside because it's 99 degrees out, but it's been great chopping it up with you and going over everything. Before we let you go, obviously your work at ESPN, TV, radio, you're still rolling here. What's going on with your content this year? Any changes? Where can people find you and all that good stuff? Promote all your stuff.
Yeah, so it'll be the usual, we'll fantasy football now, Sunday mornings, all the usual written content, receiver quarterback matchups, the playbook, all that fun stuff. So doing a bunch of NFL content right now, big moves for the offseason. We have a big roster ranking piece coming out that I just did with Seth Walder and Aaron Schatz. It drops next week, so a lot of good NFL and fantasy content coming down the barrel here soon.
Great stuff from the great Mike Clay from ESPN. And Mike, we'll let you run here. We'll continue on the podcast here. Great to chop it up with you, and we'll catch you again. We'll maybe do this in season. There is the great Mike Clay.